everybody. My name is Ray, and this is FLITE Review, my brand new movie review show for my YouTube channel. And what better way to kick it off than to review the most anticipated comic book movie of 2022, The Batman. No disrespect to any Marvel movies, to any other DC movies coming out this year. This is it. We've been waiting years for this particular film. We've known about it for the last 5 or 6 years. We've been waiting. The pandemic delayed it. We were supposed to see it back in October, had to wait another 6 months. It's finally out there. I was fortunate enough to see it in IMAX at the fan screening a couple of nights ago, and I have a lot to say about it, so let me just dive right into it. High-level thoughts. That's the best Batman movie I've ever seen in my life. Seriously. And that is no disrespect to Christopher Nolan and the TDK trilogy. It's no disrespect to Michael Keaton and the Burton films. It's no disrespect to Batfleck. I love Batfleck. Seriously. I love Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition. I love Zack Snyder's Justice League. What Ben Affleck did in those films, fantastic. This is the pinnacle as far as a Batman film is concerned. And yeah, I do wish Affleck had gotten his solo Batman movie, but that's a whole other topic that I don't want to go down. There were things that I was hoping I would see in this movie, but didn't expect that I would ever see in a Batman movie. And I saw that and more in this Batman movie, finally in live action. This is like the most incredibly complex, like diversified Batman film in terms of emotions, in terms of story, in terms of what it brings to the page, how it brings the character and the world of Gotham to life. This movie does it in a way that we have never seen before. That's why I look at some of these reviews and they're like, well, it didn't change the game, it didn't revolutionize anything. What were you looking for? Seriously, because we've never seen a Batman movie that we could quote unquote say was a real movie. Well, if you've seen comic book movies, you know, there's this thought that they all tend to be formulaic. They're all popcorn films. They're all summer blockbusters. This isn't a popcorn film. Not at all. It has great action. It has some awesome points in it, but this movie is by and large one of the best crime dramas ever made. Think Seven, think Zodiac. That's right. If you're a David Fincher fan, there's no reason you shouldn't see this movie whatsoever. The cast of this movie, absolutely impeccable. Not a single weak link in the entire cast. Starting with Robert Pattinson. And he was the big question, right? And you know what? For the general audience, it was probably a bigger question than it was for any film fans that have actually watched all of the movies that he's done in the last 10 years since Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 2. He is Batman for the rest of his life. And it's almost unfair to compare like his Batman role here with all of the others, because he's asked to do things in this film that we haven't seen any of the Batman actors in the past ever be asked to do, especially in terms of wearing the cape and cowl. And if you see the movie, you will absolutely understand what I am talking about. It is an unbelievable performance, incredible emotional weight, incredible nuance, incredible depth of feeling, and just the way that he conveys his emotions as Batman and as Bruce Wayne, and it's unbelievable. And it starts with him. He carries this movie, and it is absolutely outstanding. The great thing is he doesn't have to carry the movie on his own, because he's got an impeccable supporting cast surrounding him, starting with Zoe Kravitz. Unbelievable Selina Kyle. Incredible. This is the Catwoman that I've been waiting to see on screen for years. Seriously. I grew up with Batman the Animated Series. That was like my favorite interpretation of Catwoman. And no disrespect to Michelle Pfeiffer, no disrespect to Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway was like the closest that we got to the type of Catwoman that I've been waiting to see on screen in live action. Zoe Kravitz basically took that blueprint from The Dark Knight Rises and hit a grand slam with it. Like, absolutely just knocked it out of the park. This is by far the best Bruce Wayne, Selina Kyle dynamic we've ever seen in live action. At least I've ever seen in live action. It's all subjective. It is just my opinion. But she was impeccable. Fantastic performance by Zoe Kravitz. And then you get into the rest of the supporting cast. I mean, seriously, Colin Farrell, completely unrecognizable as Oz, the Penguin. And I wonder how many people in the general audience are going to watch the movie, and when they see Colin Farrell's name in the credits, they're going to be completely confused. Who was he in the movie? I guarantee there's going to be some stories of that. He was phenomenal. He was outstanding. Jeffrey Wright, fantastic Lieutenant Gordon, because again, this is year 2. That's not a spoiler. This is year 2 in the Batman mythos. And the way that they had his character design was amazing. And I knew Jeffrey Wright. I've seen a number of his movies. I knew he was going to be a fantastic actor. He was absolutely dynamite as Gordon. Paul Dano. Whew! The creepiest Batman villain in recent years. Seriously. And Joker doesn't count because that's a villain movie. Batman wasn't even in it. I'm talking about in a Batman film, as far as villains going up against Batman. Paul Dano, that is a career-defining performance for him. And he's had some really awesome movies. He was great in Prisoners. He was great in Little Miss Sunshine, which is the first thing I ever saw him in. And he's had other credits to that. But this, as the Riddler, like, he was absolutely diabolical and just really put on a really incredibly creepy, like, unnerving performance, you know, and he was terrifying. He was utterly terrifying, and there are points where the movie absolutely highlights how horrifically terrifying his Riddler was in this film. It's really well done. And even going beyond that, you know, John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, Andy Serkis as Alfred. I mean, has there been a bad Alfred? I don't think there's been any bad Alfreds, at least not that I can recall. No, none for me, right? Subjectively speaking, there have been no bad Alfreds for me. Andy Serkis, the next great Alfred. Fantastic job. I mean, this whole cast was just A+, dynamite, not a weak link. Outstanding job by all of them. The writing for this movie. I mentioned earlier that this is a true crime drama in every sense. It's not a popcorn film. It's not your standard blockbuster fare. I'm actually glad that this movie came out in March, and you know, if it had come out in October, it would have worked then too, because this isn't a summer movie. This is a fall, or I guess in this case, a spring movie. This is not a movie that you take the kids and the families to see. Now, look, there were families, there were kids in my theater. And I'm not saying that you can't necessarily watch this movie with your kids. It's just that if you do, you better hope that your kid doesn't scare easily, and you also better be prepared to answer some serious questions that they may or may not have after you've seen it. And the writing for this story was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the thematic storytelling and the work that is done, you know, not only in terms of the dialogue, but also in terms of just setting the stage and really building the world of Gotham the way that we've never seen Gotham built like this. We've seen Gotham City in so many different incarnations over the last several decades. This particular Gotham City, the way that it is written, the way that the people are written, the way that it is conveyed through the language of the script is utterly impeccable. It feels like a living comic book in many ways. A living crime drama comic book. And it's impeccably done. The visuals for this movie, all manner of praise to DP Greg Fraser. Seriously, the director of photography for this film, I mean, the lighting and the camera angles and just, you know, the choices that were made with the visual language of this movie really gave this a darker, grittier effect more than we've seen in any other films. And I want to be careful using the word dark, because that word gets so overused by like tons of critics, and especially by tons of people on social media, where they're like, "Oh, this is such a dark film. I can't believe that they wouldn't make it. He never smiles. It's not bright. It's not hopeful." No, that's no. Don't oversimplify the word dark by using it in those terms. When I say dark, I mean literally in terms of the shading, and I mean literally in terms of the atmosphere that is visually constructed around us. Most of this movie takes place at night. There are definitely daytime scenes, but this is a scenario where the people making this movie, Matt Reeves and company, are aware of the fact that they're dealing with a character who does most of his best work at night. And they cater to that. And we've seen that before in Batman movies. We saw it in Batman 89, you know, the Burton films. We saw it in the Schumacher films. We certainly saw it in most of the Dark Knight films, with the exception of the climax in Dark Knight Rises. We definitely saw it in BVS and Zack Snyder's Justice League. Batman is a nighttime character. His whole aesthetic and his whole brand of storytelling, his character works best at night. This movie understands that to the letter. Greg Fraser understood the assignment with that, and he filmed a Batman film in the grittiest possible, most incredible way that we've ever seen it. At least that I've ever seen it, subjectively speaking. And you can also tell that there was a ton of practical effects that were put into this. I mean, there might be some CGI here and there, but this is largely a practical effect movie, and that's absolutely the case with the chase sequence that we've seen in the trailers, you know, when it comes to the Batmobile and that car chase. Listen, it is a god-tier car chase. Seriously. Fight choreography was on point as well. This is one of the higher points of fight choreography that we've seen with a Batman film. It's not quite Warehouse in BVS, but it doesn't need to be, because it's not that type of film. It's not that type of environment. It's not that type of universe. It's a lot of close quarters combat like we're used to seeing, but there is definitely some dexterity and some acrobatic nature, not just with Pattinson's Batman, but also with Kravitz's Selina Kyle and anybody that they are fighting. The music. I am a massive fan of film scores. I am a massive fan of Michael Giacchino, and this is absolutely his magnum opus. And I've been a fan of his music since The Incredibles, and I loved what he did with Star Trek. The man has scored 3 Star Trek films. He scored a Star Wars film. He scored Mission Impossible. He scored Jurassic World. Like, he's the gamut. He's like the closest thing we have to a modern day John Williams. And this is his most incredible work that he's done to date. The score that he put together for this film, I actually listened to it about 4 or 5 times before even seeing the movie, and it was made all the better placing it within the context of the film that we saw, because it fit what we saw on screen so well. And that's the hallmark of a great score, right? You want the music to fit exactly what it is that you're seeing on film. You don't want it to take you out of it or put you out of place or try to make the moment bigger than it actually is. No, everything was in sync. There are definitely times where this movie goes into horror territory and actually like introduces some horror elements like in the score and like in what we're seeing, and really heightening the tension. Does such a great job of heightening the tension at different points in the film for certain scenes, not just with the Riddler, but certainly with Batman and anybody else that he's dealing with in that particular sense, and not even just for high octane action scenes, but also for some of the slower, the dialogue scenes and some of the more tense interactions that happen in between characters. Michael Giacchino is one of the best composers out there in the business right now, and he does just an absolutely incredible job with this score. So I think it's safe to say that I love The Batman. It is a fantastic movie, and I've already said it's the best Batman movie, in my opinion, that I've ever seen, to date. It's a moving target, right? Because it was Batman Begins for me. And anytime a new Batman movie comes out, I like to keep my mind open to the possibility of, hey, maybe we'll see something different. Maybe we'll see something new. Let's see where it ranks in the pantheon. And for me, subjectively, this is the pinnacle. This is the new bar. The new bar has been set for Batman films, and it has been set by Matt Reeves. It has been set by Robert Pattinson and company, and Zoe Kravitz and everybody else involved. Greg Fraser, Michael Giacchino. Everyone involved in this movie deserves as much kudos and as much praise as they can possibly get. Unbelievable what they did with this movie. The Batman is an absolute grand slam. Not a home run, a grand slam for DC in this respect. If you have not seen it yet, do yourself a favor and go see it. 2 hours and 55 minutes, it does not feel like it, seriously. I guess that's the last thing I can say about this. The runtime is not a concern as far as the pacing and as far as the actual structure of this film. It most certainly does not feel like 3 hours. Kind of reminds me of Heat in that sense, and very much so, where I was so enthralled in the story, I was so like wrapped up in what was going on that I didn't notice the clock passing. And by the time it was over, it was like, oh wow, really? It's been 3 hours? Did not feel like it. My theater clapped, right? They had the applause, however you feel about applauding in movie theaters. Mine applauded when the movie was over, and everybody stayed waiting for something at the end of the credits. There is something at the end of the credits. It's not a scene. It's not anything that's teasing to anything. It's not a post-credit scene like we're normally used to with Marvel and DC movies. It's just a little Easter egg. That's all it is. That's all I will say about it. But definitely go see it if you haven't had a chance to see it. If you dug this episode of Flight Review, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. There will definitely be more of these coming down the pipe on this YouTube channel. If you're interested in my podcast that comes out every week, it is available at theflightcast.com along with my blog as well. I also have a Patreon with some bonus content and some extra reviews where I talk about extra movies, TV, and comic reviews, and a lot of comics pertaining to this particular film, including, the Scott Snyder New 52 Batman run, which definitely had an influence on this movie. I review quite a bit of that on my Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/theflightcast. You can sign up there to be a Patreon member and get a whole bunch of extra content, which will now include videos as well, in addition to the podcasting stuff that I've been posting there for all the patrons that support the Flightcast. Thank you, everybody, and I will see you next time.